America doesn't have a gun control problem. We have a white people problem. Now, I came across this article while watching Uncle Hotep, the Handy Mayhem, on his YouTube channel. And the story is from The Root. Notice the nice image of the gun show with all the white people shopping for their guns. Obviously, this is a bad thing somehow. So, after watching Uncle Hotep do the story, I went to The Root and I read the article for myself. And I wanted to do my version, my point of view on the article. Now, while he did a good job of making fun of the writer, the author of this article, one Damon Young, whom Uncle Hotep refers to as paper on the wall blacks. He might use another word. I'm not going to use the other words for various reasons, but paper on the wall blacks, meaning these people have degrees on their wall, and so somehow they're qualified to talk for all black people, and in this case about white people. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and read this article and stop and point out at certain parts of the article. Last August, as my wife and I and two of our friends biked through the Great Allegheny Passage in MakersSupport, Pennsylvania. I'm not sure how you say that, Allegheny. I've never been there, never heard of it. A city 12 miles from Pittsburgh, I joked that we probably wouldn't see any more black people until Maryland. I was wrong. In the 150 miles between Pittsburgh and Cumberland, Maryland, we saw 4. The dearth of black people on the Gap Trail should be no surprise to anyone who's driven through Pennsylvania. I've done this from west to east. Pennsylvania is a long, wooded state. It's a long time to drive from west to east in Pennsylvania. Anyway, a popular joke about the state is that it's Pittsburgh on one side, Philadelphia on the other, and Alabama is in the middle. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think a lot of black people live in Alabama, don't they? I know a lot of white people live in Alabama as well, but I do think that there's a lot of blacks in Alabama, so the joke isn't even accurate, nor is it funny. Anyway, the joke, of course, is that once you leave those metropolitan areas, you're surrounded by small towns and rural farmland. And surrounded by small towns and rural farmland is a euphemistic way of saying surrounded by whiteness. The evil whiteness. Now, yeah, most black people, like their white liberal counterparts, tend to live in big metropolitan cities. Why is that? Well, for one, big metropolitan cities are usually run by Democrats. So there's lots of freebies and goodies and, all sorts of big government programs and lots of rules, directing people how to live their life. Whereas in rural America, small town America, they're generally not run by liberals. They're generally conservative run, more freedom based, less rules and regulations and restrictions. So yes, white people, particularly conservatives, I'm sure you can find conservative blacks whom also live in small town rural America. Thing is, that dynamic isn't exactly unique to Pennsylvania. Regardless of where you are in the country, once you get 10 to 15 miles outside a city's greater metropolitan area, you are probably going to splash into a sea of white people. Now, where I live, I splash into a sea of black people every day. But where he is talking about, he splashed into a sea of white people. And that sea probably won't end until you're near another city. It's so stark that if you had no concept of America and you asked an American where the black people lived, they could just draw a small circle around the 30 largest cities, say there, and be mostly accurate. And then if you asked where the white people lived, they could say there too, and everywhere else. Like I explained earlier, the liberals, both white and black, tend to congregate in the metropolitan areas. White people who like less restriction, also less people. I too am planning to leave this overcrowded metropolis that I currently live in for a small town American city in a southern state this fall, as soon as my lease is over. So, yeah, anyway. In America, white people are everywhere. And this ubiquity connects to perhaps our greatest irony. We black people are vastly outnumbered by them. They own more land, earn and possess more money, and have all the guns. Most of the people making laws are white, as are most of the people enforcing them. There are entire states you can drive through without seeing one of us, black person. Entire lives that can be led without ever having any meaningful interaction with us, black people. We are surrounded, outnumbered, out-resourced, and outgunned. Our entire existence here is a continual assault on our bodies, whatever the hell that means. Now, I go outside my door and I am vastly outnumbered, surrounded, and probably outgunned where I live too. And it ain't by a bunch of white people, I'll tell you that. But we are the ones perceived to be the threats. We are the ones their, white people, are scared of. Well, let's just look, though, at crime in big cities. Do we even have to mention Chicago? Democratic-run city. I'm going to say probably over 100 people have already been killed in Chicago this year alone. Black on black crime, mind you, gangs, violence. Then let's talk about places like Ferguson, Maryland. He was riding to Maryland. What about Baltimore? Los Angeles? The crime rates in all of these places, which are all liberal-run cities, are highly populated by blacks, and the crime is highly committed by the black people. Not saying white people don't commit crime, and I'm not saying every black person there commits the crime, but when you look at the statistics, considering the amount of black people in this country versus the amount of crime committed by black people, the numbers are outrageous, and they happen to have, in these overpopulated, overcongested cities where the majority of black people reside. He just doesn't point that out in his article. But we are the ones perceived to be the threats. We are the ones they're scared of. We are the ones who tell our children how to dress and how to wear their hair so they're not thought of as threats to them. Now, I don't know anybody who is concerned with someone's hairstyle as being threatening. I don't think it's whether you have an afro or you have, nappy hair that makes you threatening. The dress part, maybe, when you wear your pants below your ass and you look like you're probably part of a gang because gang members dress that way, and the bandanas on their head, and maybe there is an image that gangbangers look like, and maybe when you see 3, 4, 5, 6 black guys dressed like these gangbangers, you might think that they're gangbangers, and that's why you get scared if you're a white person, particularly if you're a white person that doesn't grow up around people like that. So, you know, maybe that's cause for alarm, considering the crime rate difference that I said that happens in places like Chicago. Now, I won't mention New York because New York has been fairly cleaned up over the last decade or so, not because of the Democrats in charge. When Rudy Giuliani was in charge, he did quite the cleaning up of New York City and rehabilitated this city. So the crime here isn't so astronomical like it is in cities like Chicago, to name one. But yeah, I mean, look at all the pictures of gangbangers, and they all have, you know, their pants hanging below their ass, bandanas, red and blue, and all that stuff. So they have an image. So it's not like they're wearing khaki pants and sweaters tied around their necks, and that white people are scared of, you know, normal looking dressed black people, that you have to teach your kid. You should teach your kid not to look like a gangbanger, whether or not people are scared of them. That should just be, you know, a good lesson regardless. Anyway. We are the ones who consciously and subconsciously modify our voices and our behavior when forced to interact with them, us white people. We're the ones whom trained officers with weapons and badges and handcuffs and legal justifications are so damn scared of that we've created entire curricula based on that fear, teaching ourselves what to do to seem less frightening to them. Now, it's more likely that cops shoot and kill white people, statistically, and because of the perceived racism and everything that cops could be charged with if they do shoot a black person, they are even less likely to approach and apprehend black people because they're scared of the repercussion that society has brought upon them in today's day and age. And again, I live in a predominantly black neighborhood, and I don't see this happening at all. I don't see cops driving around, harassing black kids, throwing them up against the wall, shooting them. None of that stuff. And I live in a very black neighborhood, and I just don't see it happening. Back to the article. This fear is why they're so obsessed with arming themselves with multiple human-killing machines. It's why they fight against even the notion of incremental disarmament so vehemently. No. First of all, law-abiding Second Amendment gun owners arm themselves, one, because it's their right, two, because they like having guns, three, because the whole point of the Second Amendment is to protect Americans from a tyrannical government. That is the point of the Second Amendment. A well-armed militia to stand against a tyrannical government or an invading force. Now, it doesn't hurt when it helps in self-defense, defense of your home, hunting, sporting, going to the range, things like that. That's other reasons why people own guns. Also, if you like your First Amendment, the reason we still have a First Amendment is because we have a Second Amendment. Just look around the world. Look around the world where they don't have the guns that we have here in America. They also don't have the same rights that we have here in America. They don't have the same free speech that we have here in America. You like your free speech, it's because we still have the Second Amendment to protect the First Amendment and all the other rights. So those are the reasons why not only white people, for that matter, but yes, mostly white people do have guns in this country, but plenty of law-abiding blacks, Latinos, Asians who are American citizens that live in this country also possess firearms. And so do criminals. But they get them off the black market. They don't respect the laws, and they're not good owners of guns. But anyway, back to the story. They are scared shitless of us, of anyone who is not them. No, it's not true. And he goes on to say that's why these gun laws exist, and that is not true. I just went through why the gun laws exist. Not because we're scared of black people. It doesn't say anywhere in the Constitution that gun laws exist because white people are scared of black people. That's just plain retarded. Like, obviously, the guy who's writing this article. Perhaps this fear is guilt-based. Oh, now he's even got to include the white guilt. And no white guilt here, buddy. And they're scared the same way you were as a kid when you stole some cash from your teacher's purse. Now that's kind of telling. Here, this black guy who's acting like he's so much more better than all these gun-owning white people who are so unreasonably scared of the black people. And then he goes on to say how that we should feel guilt the same way you would feel guilt. Now this seems like a personal anecdote. The same way you would feel guilt when you were a kid who stole some cash from your teacher's purse. I never stole cash from my teacher's purse when I was a kid. Now, this seems like Damon Young or someone he knew growing up, and I assume that he grew up in a black neighborhood, stole cash from a teacher's purse. Now that's kind of telling to me, and it also goes against his whole narrative of the black people being all innocent and white people wrongly fearing them. Why were you stealing money out of your teacher's purse? It seems like you're the one possessing the guilt. Not me. I didn't do anything to any black people or steal money out of my teacher's purse. And you kept waiting for the repercussions, but they just never came. But that fear, that feeling that you'd have to answer for your wrongs eventually, never quite left. No, I don't feel like that. I'm sorry that a few white people enslaved a few black people a few hundred years ago. I don't feel any guilt about it. In fact, my family wasn't even here back then. But even if they were, even if I had slave-owning family members, it wasn't me. I didn't do it. And so I'm not going to feel guilty about it, about something I didn't do. That's just plain ridiculous. But white people have freed the slaves, ended slavery throughout America and all Western countries and cultures, while the Arabs were the first to have slaves. Africans were enslaving each other. Africans were selling the slaves to the Arabs, who then sold the slaves to the Europeans. And slave trading still exists in black and brown countries in the Middle East and Africa today in 2018. Not in America, not in Europe, not in Western white countries. In black and brown countries in Africa and the Middle East, slavery still exists today. Anyway. Or maybe this fear is karmic, a belief that once we get on top, we'll treat them, the whites, the way they treated us, the blacks. I guess going back again to the past. Not now, because now white people bend over backwards to please non-white people, so much and so that they make rules in their favor. I venture to say today, black privilege or people of color privilege is more prevalent than the mystical white privilege. Either way, I doubt we'll see any movement on guns until they acknowledge this pervasive and delusional and self-destructive collective fear and go to therapy. So now white people are collectively crazy and need to go to therapy to get over their love of the Second Amendment and guns, because we are somehow guilty and wrongly afraid of black people and misuse our power and our privilege, and we're ridden with guilt. That's what he says. So essentially, this article is a backhanded attempt to say that white people are crazy, wrongfully fear black people who do nothing but, steal money out of their teachers' purses. They're completely innocent, and we are the crazy, guilty, privileged party who needs to go to therapy and have our heads checked so that we can eliminate our love of guns and the Second Amendment in this country, and that we're afraid of what's going to happen when black people are in power, that they're going to exact revenge on us. So we're going to hold on to our guns, and you have to pry them out of our cold, dead hands if you ever want them. That's the gist of this article. I gotta say, these people at the root are obsessed with white people. I looked through and they have multiple articles about white people, about whiteness. No wonder why they always talk about white supremacy, because we rule their thoughts. All they can think about, and Uncle Hotep touches on this as well, and if you don't know who Uncle Hotep is, he's a black guy. He's a black conservative, a Trump supporter. And he says that black people want to be liked by white people. They're all trying to impress white people, and white people are always on their minds because they want our approval. Believe me, except stuff like this and the fact that I go outside and I can't help but see black people everywhere I go, I don't think about black people that much, to be honest with you, unless there's something specific about it. I'm not sitting there thinking about them constantly. The way these people apparently think about white people. I mean, they have to write articles. They have a whole website basically dedicated to demeaning, belittling, calling us supremacists, laying guilt on us. I mean, no wonder why we're so supreme in their minds. We're all they think about. If all I thought about something all the time, that would be the supreme thought on my mind. It would rule supreme. Black people, you don't have to think about us all the time. It's nice, but go worry about yourself. Anyway, that's my take on this article by Damon Young of The Root, and how America doesn't have a gun problem. We have a white people problem. Anyway, that's all I have. I'm out of here. America doesn't have a gun problem. America has a white people problem. White people.